Loading speeds. All right, so we are now streaming live on Facebook. Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. My name is Sarah Parks from the St. Joseph Museum. I am our Programming and Events Coordinator. With us today to share her Vintage Valentine Day card collection is Jamie Withrow. You may know her from Jamie's Secret Garden. Jamie will give us a little presentation on her collection, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll also have a time for questions. And if you want to go ahead, I'm going to stop video and mute the group for now for the presentation. And then afterwards for questions, feel free to either use the chat or hop back on with your video and your microphone. I will turn it over to Jamie now.
Well, thank you, Sarah, for inviting me to this and letting share my Valentine collection. And we have Allie, she's on the camera right behind you there. She's always does the filming for me on our Facebook and things. So I'm glad she can make it in today. I started collecting Valentines around 1980. After graduating from high school, I went and worked in my grandmother's antique shop for 7 years. She had an antique shop in Fawcett, and I got to learn all kinds of wonderful things, you know, the history of dish patterns, furniture styles. Plus, that's how I learned how to do business, was from my grandmother. So I started collecting Valentine cards because I seen them, each one was like a little tiny piece of art. And they were cheap then, and I could afford this little tiny piece of art. Well, the collection just kept growing throughout the years, and so we're going to get started sharing them with you. First of all, Valentine's Day is, legend has it that Saint Valentinus was put in prison by Claudius III, who was an emperor in Rome in 271 AD. He was jailed for condemning the pagan gods, and he was martyred on February 14th. And so we celebrate Valentine's Day in honor of him, and most people don't realize that it is actually called Saint Valentine's Day. Well, in the middle of February, people had kept celebrating through gifts and notes, and all through until about 1471 is whenever the first Valentine was sent. So for all the people that think Hallmark is the one who started the card business, this has been going on lots longer than Hallmark has been around. So I'm going to get started. The golden age of Valentine starts about 1840. And the early Valentines, it was on the front of the card. There was no message on the inside. So these are called paper lace Valentines. This is actually cut out paper, much like what we would know a doily is. And the message was put on the outside of the card. But whenever there was a woman named Esther Holland, and she's considered the queen of the American Valentine, well, the mother of the American Valentine. And so she was the one who started. These were actually already produced in England, but she was the one who brought them to the United States and started perfecting them. She actually had her own business, which she could do because she was a single woman. If she would have married, she would have been at that time forced to give it up her career. This actually is one of her cards because of the H on the back. In 1849, she started, her brother and her father had a printing business and a bookshop. And so she sent about 11 of her cards that she designed out with her brother, who was the salesperson, hoping to get $200 worth in sales. But when he came back from showing all of his storekeepers, he had
$2,000 worth in sales. So she immediately went into business, started having her friends and people put all of these Valentines together. She is the one who actually invented the hinge Valentine. See how that's on a hinge that makes it dimensional? And this is the only one that I can say is hers because the mark, she didn't start out marking her Valentines because she didn't feel like there was a need to, but people kept knocking them off and, you know, making copies of them. And so she started putting the H on the back of them. All of these are embossed with these little things right here. This is called die cuts. And I'm going to show you what a die cut is. This is Dresden gold on there, and they have, some of them have silver, but they're just gorgeous. And then on the inside, and so also the thing about these Valentines, this one's actually dated 1896. Most of my Valentines do not have markings on them. These little things here are called die cuts, and that's what these are. So you would buy like a sheet of paper and you could cut and you would cut these out and then could embellish your own Valentines. They were made in Germany because Germany had much better printers than we did at that time. So they're all embossed and very detailed. Many of the Valentines were put because color and pretty things were few and far between. So people put them in scrapbooks. This is a oilcloth scrapbook here that has a Valentine that's glued into it. So all of these paper laces, they were made mostly between 1840 to 1900. This one having the H on it for Esther's would date it because she changed her mark in, just 1 second, in I can't find the 1870s, she changed her mark. So this should be prior to 1870 there. This Valentine here, this one is my oldest one that's dated. It's dated 1869 or 1879. And it's the little cherubs here. This paper lace is finer quality. I would guess that it is German instead of where most of the paper lace was made in England, just because it's more in depth and more embossed. Also, on Esther's work, most of them, her early work, started out and it was just a piece of paper with a saying glued onto the inside of it. Esther is also noted for putting the color behind the paper lace. Before that, most of the people, they were just cream on white and you couldn't see them that well, but as you can see, it really makes the paper lace pop. You can see where die cuts have been here, there. So all of these are great examples of paper lace. This one there again has the Dresden gold on it. And I think it's so cute. So it's a cherub riding a swan is the picture on the inside. There again, it's hinged. We can't prove that this was one of Esther's cards, but there's a good chance that it was. This is another one. That's a smaller version. This one's a gorgeous one with the blues. Here, and notice the gold around there. So that was either hand embellished with gold or it was Dresden. This is not a paper lace card like those. I'm not sure the age about this one. This is hand tinted. So it was a black and white card and they actually, someone has colored that on. This has the paper roses on it. But I do believe it's older than 1900. And there again, it's hand tinted on the inside. smaller of the paper lace. The paper lace is my favorite. I don't even really know how I started getting so many of them, but it is definitely my favorite. This paper lace, this one was made by George Whitney because there is a W on the back right there. He actually worked for a short time for Esther Holland. And so I thought it was pretty funny that his initial and how he marked his card was very similar to how she marked hers with the H and the W. Later, because he was George Whitney, this became his mark in later years. And he was in business until World War II started. So, but because of this, we know that this one is old, is around 1889 is the date on this card, because he changed his emblem around that date. And whenever I do write on the back of mine what the date is, and if there's a C, that means it's circa, C-I-R-A. That means 10 years on either side of that date, because it's so hard to date cards and things unless the person who received it or the giver wrote inside of them. We can just make good estimates, or the one thing you can't do is judge by their clothing, because they were so, they like the Edwardian clothing from different eras and things. This is really fun. This is a handmade Valentine. So they did have enough money to put the die cut on the inside, but you can see how they were trying to mimic the lines here. Handmade Valentines are very few and far between. And here's where they wrote on the inside of it. But they even did a good job cutting the paper here around. So that's a handmade Valentine from probably pre-1900. This is a homemade Valentine that is probably right around the turn of the century, because these cherries are much like the cherries that would have been in the garden seed books. The best artists were hired for the garden seed books. And so they made their own Valentine out of here. Okay, so these were, the paper laces were about, here's a very interesting one too. So this one's a heavy cardboard, has a little easel on the back of it so it stands up, and through the pansy you can see the winter scene that's inside of it. So that layering, this is actually satin on there, and it even has little hints of sparkle on it here and there. So the flowers were very important too on what the message said, because of the language of flowers. So not only did you have to like the card and think it was pretty and make the inside match what you wanted it to say, but you also had to be aware of what all these flowers meant on there before you could give it. Around 1900 to 1915, that is whenever the postcard was the big thing for Valentine's Day. Well, really, the postcard craze was for them. As you know, we can still send postcards, but that was the time when it was most used. This is a leather postcard. The one good thing about postcards is there are dates on the back of them. And there's a few of them. They, of course, have the date it was sent, but not the year it was sent. I'm thinking this one was around like 1903, whenever they used leather postcards for a while. Most of these are right around in the teens, so like 1900 to 1911. But this is a beautiful one. Many of them, because of course the four-leaf clover means good luck. And here, I was wanting to give you some decorating ideas, what you can do with some of the Valentines there in this lantern. So it's a great way to display them. They're under glass. I also use a lot of mine under bell jars, and that keeps them from getting dusty and dirty. when I store my Valentines, they go in, I have a book. You want to make sure it's acid-free paper. So there's all these different shapes and things that you can fill these up. Usually the book's full, but they're all on this table of different ones. So that way I can look through them. It keeps them nice and safe. You just want to make sure they don't get wet by somewhere that's moist. Okay, here's a great little German-made Valentine. Most of the really good paper was printed in Germany. So in the early 1900s, this is called a hanger. And I only have one of those. So that's how they come, but the craze did not last very long. So it was only about 1900 to 1910 they made those. I only have one of those. The next thing, so the paper lace started dying down. This one's copyrighted 1903. This Valentine, what's beautiful is on the back of it. But you can see the inside is still very much like the paper lace ones. So everything changes. So Valentine started changing too. That's in in the early 1900s. That's when the pull out Valentine came. So here it is. Here, you can see it's a woman driving a car. The car Valentines came out pretty much immediately after the car became made to the public. So early 1900 on that one. This is a German one, and part of it broke over me playing with these, getting them out. So this is a gorgeous pull down. Start there. So it says, "To my Valentine." On the back of the card, it says printed in Germany. Because it says printed in Germany, or if it just said Germany, it means that it's older than 1930. In the 1930s, the US government started having things that were imported say on them made in and whatever they were from. So if it was newer than 1930, it would say made in Germany instead of printed in Germany. Let's see how many layers come out. So that's a really pretty card. So there's lots of children on Valentine, and I was wondering why, and it's because we would all like to have eternal youth. So the flowers. So this is another Valentine that is pre-1930s. I believe it's German also. Yes. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you is the honeycombs up here. So the honeycombs, they had been making those in Germany and Europe for quite a while before they came to the United States. But in 1903, we started making our own honeycombs here. So that's what this is. So it's actually crepe paper. And this one is a pedestal. It has a pedestal, a column, and a canopy on the top of it. This one, I believe, is about from 1930. This little Valentine has the honeycomb here. I believe both of these are printed by the Beasley Company. And that would make them right around 1920s to the 1930s. He does have a little on the back, so he'll stand up. So these are really fun. So there again, they open up here. I believe these are American made ones. And so there's the accordion there. And what's fun on this one, see how the paper's here on the inside, but on the outside of the card, they've used the same artwork here. So they've used the same artwork, but changed it up. So I thought that was really fun to be able to have two of those. And this is one of my favorite ones just because I love fairies and flowers and things. So this one's a little flower fairy on the inside that has the honeycomb on the sides of it. Okay. And also, here's some things that right through here. So one of the ways to date a card is by the inventions in them. Just like this card, this is by the artist is Mary Herbert, and it says, "Hello Central, give me one man for a Valentine." And so she's on the candlestick phone there. And these little children are also talking on the candlestick phone, which they stopped producing it, I believe, in 1927, meaning these cards are probably older than that. This one for sure is printed in the United States. Around 1900, things started becoming a lot more children, a little bit more lighthearted. Some of them even started getting having puns to them. This shelf here, these are from the 1930s. This is made in Germany here. It's a pull down, and these are also made in Germany after the 1930s. This up here is a reverse painting, and it says "Sing to My Valentine," and it is made in the United States here, and it's dated 1932. This is printed in Germany, and it's after the 1930s, and it's Hansel and Gretel with the little house there. It has a little window that opens, and there used to be a secret message that would be underneath here. But the message is now gone. Okay, let's see here. So here's more of the pull down Valentine, just fun little cherubs. But you can see it's getting a little more lighthearted, a little sweeter, not as heavy as some of the others. And around in the teens, we started seeing a lot of influence from Charles Twelvetree. So this is one of his cards. And by Grace, which this is not one of Grace Dresden. No, I can't think of Grace's last name, but she's the creator of the Campbell Soup Kids. This is not one of her cards, but you can definitely see that influence there. The children that are little chubby cheeks, very rounded faces. And here's another one. This is not by her either, but you can see that the little chubby legs. They wanted their children, they wanted to show people what healthy looked like, because so many people couldn't afford to eat. They actually like their children a little rounder than we do nowadays. In fact, it wasn't too long ago, they actually reinvented the Campbell Soup Kids to be skinnier because the other ones were a little chunkier. But like I said, you wanted to be able to look like you could afford to eat, because only the poor people were extremely thin at that time. This is one of my favorite cards. It is pre-1920, and it says on her sash, "Votes for Women." So white women in America got the right to vote in, I believe, in the 1920s, early 1920s. And what it says here, it says, "To my Valentine, cast your vote here. If you believe that women should vote, just let your heart your verdict denote." And then the little boy goes in and puts his yes ballot in the box. And that, so what I like about Valentine's is that you can learn history from them. You know, this was very important point in history, and they made a Valentine about it. Another thing that's very fun. So around 1900, they started doing mechanical Valentines. So this little boy, it says Valentine greetings on it, and he has a nest of birds and can swing it back and forth. So you can see it on the back. There's a pivot there, a little ring so he can move it. This one's printed in Germany. And this, he's missing the stand so he could stand up. That's what would have been here, was a piece of paper that swirled, but you can see printed in Germany. And this little dog, his tongue and his eyes come out. So those are really sweet. So mechanical ones have been around for a long time. In the 1920s and 30s, they also started making Valentines that were specifically for children. And it wasn't long after that that the school box came, the Valentine box at school came in. This is one, a very cute one, because it's got the little hidden in the closet there. And it says, "I've got the sweetest thing in my closet." And there's the little boy there. So on this side, it says, "I'm your honey." But decorating the Valentine box came into schools. So that kind of changed things too. Valentines started getting smaller and they came in packs. So that way you could buy a pack and give them to all of your schoolmates. In the 1940s, we started changing again with World War II happening. This is, there says, "Here's something to blow about. I'd like to draft you for my Valentine." So that's definitely age. So we've seen lots of things, and here's a sailor that's from the same time period. So a lot of the Valentines had things to do with sailors, military, also foreign, because we were going to different countries. This is a United States one, and it is mechanical also. So she raises her veil up and down. But because we were going to different countries, that influenced some of our Valentines also. I have only two African American cards in my collection, and this is one of them. It's made in the USA, so they are very hard to find. And I believe it's around the 1940s also. These are little candy containers from that time era also, that are made in America. In the whoops, we kind of forgot the 30s. Well, we'll talk about 30s. In the 1930s, we started seeing a lot of Disney coming out. Our Disney influence. These aren't necessarily Disney ones, but Disney inspired lookalikes. Then in the 1950s, so after the war, we started seeing things. Here's another honeycomb. This actually was my friend Peggy's, and she gave it to me. So it makes a little honeycomb of them to shake, and she received it in 1952. This one, really cute. Also, there's like a little Valentine paper doll book. That's from the 1950s. So you would cut out his clothes and then you could put them on him. So this is super cute. These are little paint books from the 1950s also. So to my Valentine, that's the little paintbrush right there that he's holding in his hand. And then inside of here, you could tear these out. And then later in the book, there's actually the little paints. You would get these wet and to paint your Valentines with. And I have a little boy one and a little girl. Same arrow there. Okay, I think we've about covered it all. If you've got any questions, I will try to answer them. Or was it clear about things? That's great if you don't have any questions, because I probably don't know the answer.
Well, I know I had a couple, so not gonna let you off the hook too easy. You had, let me pull them up again. I had written them down so I didn't forget. You had mentioned that you have since stopped actively collecting. Do you have an idea of like a rough number of how many you have in the collection?
I didn't count, probably over 100, easy. I have about 2 books, and unfortunately I collect other paper stuff too. So
not just Valentines, but if I find a good postcard or a good, I get it. And actually doing all this research, I'm now ready to start collecting again to get ready for this. So it's actually made me excited, and I learned a whole lot of things I didn't know, especially with the wonderful snow day yesterday that you just stayed inside and couldn't do anything. So it gave me a whole day to research more of my collection. So I'm actually anxious to get out to the antique shops and start hunting them again.
That was one of my other questions, is how you go about finding them if someone was on the hunt for starting their own collection of, cards or postcards or something along that line.
Yeah, there's so many reproductions out there. You got to know what you're doing. So either make sure that it's cheap enough that you don't care if it's a reproduction. Ordering things online, that's just really scary to me because you don't know. There's all kinds of little trick words that they can use that they're not lying, but they're not telling you 100% of the truth. It used to be there was antique shops, so you would know your dealer. Now there's antique malls, and to know your dealers there. One of the books that I love, I'll grab it real quick. Remember, we used to do all of our learning by books. This is a Valentine book I have that helps, give descriptions, and the prices don't apply anymore because this was printed in in the 1990s, I think. So, but it gives you an idea, but the reproductions look really good. Expect there to be wear on your cards. That's also one thing, that if they're too perfect, even though you want them as perfect as possible, that's also a way to kind of test them. What's great about the postcards is them having, usually dates on them, like this one's 1961. On postcards, it's actually more desirable. They said that for it not to have been mailed, because they tend to be in better condition that they didn't go through the mail.
That definitely makes sense. I know we've got a few, I think about 13 or so postcards in the museum's collection, and most of them have been mailed. And we deal with paper and like the conservation of that all the time. I'd assume your mechanical ones and the especially the fragile paper are a lot harder to keep nice and find in nice condition. But that also makes it easier for you to know that they're not a reproduction, that they've had that wear to them.
Yeah, so these are pages. I got these plastic pages at Hobby Lobby. You want acid free. And what I did was I put the really fragile ones with cardboard behind it. And so that way it's going to have less chance of wearing on the edges. I have started it with pencil, just writing really lightly on the back of the cards if I know, what the error is, or just like, I'll give you an example, because I was researching Charles Twelvetree, who did this here, and wasn't really sure of the date on it because it says down here painted by Charles Twelvetree. And then so I was looking through his cards, and then I noticed that he had a postcard that was on the website that looks very similar to this. And so then I got mine out, and then because it's a postcard, it was dated, I feel like it's 1917 right there. So that let me know that, this is pretty close to the same error in time. So just looking for, inventions, significant dates in history is a really good way to also know how to get out there and to buy vintage paper. Keep in mind, it's paper. It's fragile. It's very fragile.
Right. I did love that voting one. I think that was one of my favorite ones that you showed.
Well, that's whenever we just started going, we need to find out when women could vote. And then
and it's really helped them give it to it.
You did mention a lot of the early ones had very specific messages with their floral designs. With Valentine's Day coming up, is there anything that we need to be aware of to not, or maybe to send to our Valentines this year?
Well, there's a book called The Language of Flowers. I used to have a reproduction of it, and I let someone borrow it. And I have no idea who I did and never seen it again. But I'm sure you could go to the internet to look up what those mean. But I think it's fun that one of the things I do remember, of course, poison ivy is bad. English ivy, that means where God has walked, is one of the sayings there. A white rose was purity, but you can go to that. Also, if you gave someone a nosegay, if say you have all these flowers picked out from your garden that you're going to go give your best gal, and you seen her with someone else, if you handed her that bouquet backwards, that means everything is the reverse of what you were going to tell her. So because people couldn't speak openly, they had hidden languages like in flowers, or how a lady held her fan, told her if she was available or not, because all of those things you could not say. It was not proper. So there was all these little hidden clues that you had to keep up with.
Very interesting. Let me check our Facebook feed just real quick and see if we had any comments or questions on there. If anybody on Zoom has any, feel free to jump over. I do not see any on our Facebook. So I'm going to say that you are off the hook with answering questions then. Thank you, Jamie, again for joining us and sharing with your collection. Any wrap-up thoughts that you have that you wanted to share?
I'm going to make a display for the Valentines here at the store, so people can come in and see them and ask questions about them. You can bring them in if you want me to give you my unprofessional opinion about them to help you figure them out or something. So we're open Tuesday through Saturday, 10 o'clock to 6 o'clock. So bring your Valentines in, and please, you can share your Valentines after we close also, ones that you own, and tell the history behind that card. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, bye.